Alright, and that is recording. It's always hard to do a video like this because I never know what the quality is going to be like. So I could just waste the next 3 hours of my life and then decide, you know what? I want to scrap that. Hello, everybody. It's Bobby Bionic, and yes, I still have 2 copies of 06, for those who are wondering. So it's been a little while since I did a video like this. If you're looking for the actual edited, scripted Generations video, it's available. I'll put a card, I don't know which side it goes on, this side. Put a card right here, description and all that. But this is going to be more like a casual follow-up to it, addressing some of the points I made in that video, as well as some of the comments left, and kind of go hand in hand. So things will make a bit more sense if you watch that first, but you don't have to. You're welcome to stay. Just fair warning, there's going to be a lot of rambling in this video, so if that's not your cup of tea, I understand. But I'll have some Generations 3DS video footage in the background, so you don't have to stare at me the whole time. Though if you need me, I'll be down here. So this video is going to be right in line with a couple other ones I did that are the same format with just casually addressing certain things, footage in the background, just kind of going off the top of my head. The other ones were the Generations follow-up video, Super Tails is based, and I'm not sorry for wanting him in Origins, which I kind of address a lot of points, comments, concerns, criticisms brought up in the comments section of that video. And then another related Origins video, which actually came out before Origins released, because there's a lot of pushback about the existence of Origins to even begin with. So there was a lot of things I addressed in that video about why Origins existing isn't a bad thing. That one is unlisted though, because it's based around kind of outdated information, but it's still available through various different description links. I mean, maybe I'll even put one in this description if you're interested in watching it. It's just, I never want this channel to turn into something where like a Sonic trailer drops and you make your shallow first impressions video and it's always super sensationalized, usually implying that it's bad, horrible, that it's crazy that they're doing this, with way more energy that's necessary. Just go in about how awful this new thing is going to be. And then down the line the game comes out and hey, maybe some of your points made sense, but maybe some didn't. Like I just seen one not too long ago, like absolutely hating on Shadow Generations. And then people, for the most part, liked that game, so it's kind of, the whole comments section is just kind of like how it didn't age well, which is kind of funny to see. But I'm not trying to throw too much shade, because obviously those videos get views. A lot of mine don't, so there's that. But that's not me. I will have sections in my videos that are basically like speculations, or they're based around information that's available at the time, which I think is totally fine. It's just, I mean, it's relevant to the time that it's released, and maybe some of the predictions are true, maybe some of them aren't, but it's not just like a gut reaction video like, oh, this just came out, awful. There's similar videos for Frontiers. After that IGN trailer came out, everybody was saying is like the worst thing to happen in the franchise. And then another trailer came out not too long after, where somebody actually knew how to play the game, and a lot of people just completely flipped on that. Which I'm not saying Frontiers is a perfect game by any means, but it's a lot more competent than some people gave it credit for initially. Again, there's flaws, sure. But here I am rambling again. I haven't even touched on Generations. But what is a Bobby Bionic video without an extended intro of me just talking about why I'm making a video? I'm also interested in how many people watch this video, because the Origins video, I mean, I'm still shocked that it has as many views as it does. I think it's at like 700,000 right now, which is crazy. But the Tails video, Super Tails, was a follow-up to that one that was like 2 months, no, maybe like 2 months, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 months after that video came out. and it might have like 3,000 views right now. So big difference. But I mean, there's different things that might factor into that. I mean, it says channel update on it, which if you're a big name YouTuber and you put channel update, a lot of people probably watch it because they want to see what dramatic thing is happening in your life. But I mean, nobody knows Bobby Bionic, so it's just kind of like, well, why would I watch channel update? Also, the name is kind of lengthy. Super Tales is based, and I'm not sorry for wanting him in Origins. I mean, I like the title, it's true. And I just named it that because a lot of the pushback was about Super Tales and the huge story difference it makes. That's not really actually that much of a story difference, but I cover all that in that video. I'm not going to reiterate it all here. But the actual follow-up to the Origins video did better. I think it's at like 200,000, maybe a bit more, 250, 300. Haven't checked in a while. That's a lot better than what the Super Tales video did, but it makes sense because it's also more of the stylized videos I do that are scripted, super edited, a lot of time, effort put into them. Whereas videos like this, I just set up the camera. I mean, there's still work that goes into it. I still have to edit, put stuff over. I even have a note sheet of all the things I want to talk about because I can't keep all of that in the front of my brain. I press play and it's just, my mind goes blank for a minute, so I'm much better when it comes to using a script. But yeah, also that video came out when I didn't really have any subscribers, and I've got a bit more now, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, basically the videos like this are just an opportunity for me to expand on some of the points I made, address some of the comments, and the reason I brought up views is because without views, there aren't any comments, and without comments, I don't really have much to go off of. So that Generations video did decent. I mean, right now it's just shy of 40,000, which, I mean, I'm grateful for all the views that are there. The thing is, with this channel, if I upload an Origins video, besides the Super Tales one, basically guaranteed views. But that's not across the board for all Sonic videos. So I did 3 different Frontiers videos, and those, I mean, they did okay compared to some of my other ones, which have like 200 views. So you could have one that's 700,000, one that's 200, just how it is sometimes. It's just the way she goes. Yeah, that Generations one did really good at first, and a lot of the comments came in, and then it kind of plateaued a bit. Still get some trickle down views. Just in what I got already, it's kind of you get a good look at what kind of comments people are leaving, patterns of what other people are going to leave, similar comments, because not everybody's reading the whole comment section before posting one of their own. So you get a lot of like repeat comments, a lot of ones that are around the same subject matter, if that makes sense. And then that tells me things that I can kind of expand on. Not that anybody is waiting on the edge of their seat to see what Bobby Bionic is saying about certain points. But to me, the opinions I share in these videos are kind of important because that's what this channel is based around. Because there wouldn't be a channel without the opinions. Unless I do like a comparison video that's very objective. But even with that, this game has this one doesn't. But without any opinions attached to it, it's pretty sterile, pretty boring. There's no passion behind it. This game has this game has this, moving on. It's like, no, it's like to be more like, well, I like how they changed this to this. I like how they kept this. I personally think it would be better if they did this. So it's kind of just the basis of the whole structure of the videos. Like I said, there'd be no videos without the opinions, but a video like this is just a way to expand on those points. Why did I say this about this? Well, here's the reason. Why did I say this about that? Well, here's some more insight. Because I'm not going to fluff out the video with stuff like that because, one, I don't at the time know what everyone's going to be, kind of talking about in the comment section yet. And also it'd be really boring if every single point just has a whole explanation of why the point was made. It kind of goes against the nature of the video, which is just bring it up, explain it, move on. So then I can make a video like this for anyone who's interested, and that's that. Is this intro long enough yet? Last point I want to bring up in the intro is just that Generations video. It started out as it was gonna be just the Shadow video, and then I'll have like a small section at the beginning talking about the changes in Generations. But as usual, that kind of turned into its own thing. So then it was like Generations Part 1, Shadow Part 2. That Part 2 is still in the works. It is still coming, but it's going to take a while because a lot of work still needs to go into it. So I figured instead of just disappearing for 3 months and then dropping a video and risking people just not remembering who I am or why they subscribed in the first place, could at least supplement it with a couple videos. I got this one that you're watching right now, and then another Generations video that I first thought of a while back before the actual Generations video came out, because there's some interesting things towards the beginning of the game that, like, well, it'd be fun to share these. But I scrapped it because as the game went on, there's less of these oddities that I found. But I figured maybe I could still put out the video. It'd still be less effort than the main videos, but it could be interesting for certain people to watch. Because like I said, this Shadow video, it's in the works, but it's gonna be a minute, much like most of my videos. So, I mean, I guess that's all the setup we need. Let's move on to some of the actual Generations points. And I'll start with console versus PC. So there's a lot of comments in that video asking why it's not the PC versions that I'm comparing. I guess is a fair question, but not everybody plays on PC. But it also comes with this kind of idea that PC is the default, and if you're not doing a video on PC or playing on PC, you're like a huge outlier, and that's kind of strange to me. I mean, I'm not saying it's all PC users that are like this, but there's definitely a vocal portion of the PC market who can't really comprehend that people out there play on consoles. I mean, not everybody has a PC. Not everybody uses a PC. And I guess there is some logic to why they're asking it, which I'll cover later, because you know, there's more changes in the PlayStation versions than the PC versions. Just because of the nature of PC, you usually have the option to increase the specs, usually have the option to do button mapping. So that's two of the things that I comment on in that video that are less relevant for the PC version. But yeah, there's a lot of gamers that play on PS5. There's a lot that play on Switch. There's a lot that play on Xbox. It's not really something that should need to be said, but it seems like there's certain people who think that only PC exists. For me personally, I mean, I do have a decently powerful desktop computer, but when I'm sitting at a computer for 12 plus hours a day editing, I don't want to then also sit in front of a PC for my relaxation time when I'm playing a game. I'd rather just have, you know, a sofa or a bed that I can sit on, relax, chill. So, I mean, there's many reasons why somebody might prefer to use a console over a PC, but I mean, we don't have to go into all that. Okay, so focusing more on the PlayStation versions, there's a big reason why a PS5 player would be interested in a re-release, remaster, whatever, like Sonic Generations. PS3 games are not playable on PS5. I mean, you can use their subscription service or whatever, PlayStation Plus, to play, I guess, emulated versions of them. But, I mean, you can't take this disc and put it in the PS5. It's just not, just doesn't work that way. Look back at when the PS3 launched, it was backwards compatible with PS2, PS1, and it was very expensive. They got a lot of backlash for the price, so they took those features away, made it cheaper, and suddenly is a little bit more palatable. People were a little bit more eager to buy it because the price has gone down. Now that comes with the sacrifice of not being able to play PS2 games on your PS3, but it's kind of a trade-off sometimes. That's just how the architecture of those consoles worked. So if you play on Xbox, I mean, that's one good thing about Xbox. You can play all of your old games on the newest console. I mean, I think there's some games that aren't compatible, but for the most part, Xbox Original, 360, Xbone can all play on the Series XS, whichever you chose. That's awesome. It's just not the case for PlayStation. And again, it's just how the PS3 was made, the changes they made to it for the PS4, and then obviously they kept the same kind of structure for PS4 to PS5 because you can play your PS4 games on it. But before Sonic Shadow Generations came out, there was no way to play at least your disc. I don't know if they had another way. There's no way to play PS3 version of Generations on PS5. So when it comes to re-releases, remasters, remakes, and all that, one point you gotta look at is accessibility. That's why I always find it funny when a PS4 game gets remade or remastered for PS5. Well, it's because you can already play the PS4 version on PS5. Since it's one console generation down, it's not even going to be that big of a difference. There's not going to be a lot of things noticeable. If a company wants to release a PS5 patch to make the game run smoother and, look better and all that, that's definitely preferred, but a whole different version that's meant to be like a remake or a remaster of it, it's pretty silly in my opinion. Like, you gotta at least go another console generation back, skip one, re-release PS3 games on PS5. But also, like I said, accessibility comes into play, so there are a lot of games that were on PS3 that they re-released on PS4, called them remastered or whatever, and well, I mean, that's just the way it goes. So yeah, there's people who would want to play Sonic Shadow Generations on PS5. Also, this is the first time this is available on a Nintendo console. If you don't count Sonic Generations 3DS, because the original version of Sonic Generations wasn't going to run on Wii. And they didn't make like a, Sonic Unleashed PS2 Wii version to run on lower specs. Now, I don't know how the Switch version runs of Generations. I didn't even bother buying it for Switch because I knew that the PS5 version would be good. And it's a big risk buying a lot of games on Switch because you don't know how they're going to perform. I mean, even Superstars, it runs good on Switch, it looks decent, but it doesn't look as good as the PS5 version, so I kind of regret not getting it on there, even though that is the type of game that I'd much prefer playing portably, and I don't have a PlayStation Portal. That's a whole topic for another time. But yeah, there's people that play on PS5, there's people that play on Switch. PC isn't the only way to play video games. All of that just leads me into one comment. Now, I don't typically like to put people on 3D blast like this, but this comment was just too rich not to share. It says, OP, original poster, comparing the new release with the PS3 version seems like a corporate service for Sega in order to justify the lack of improvement plus the increased price tag. Literally no one is thinking of the PS3 version. Everyone is thinking of the existing and thriving PC version, with all its mods, and wondering whether it's worth it to upgrade due to graphical improvements, which, by the way, are non-existent. There's a few things to break down in this comment. First one is kind of the more obvious one. No one's forcing you to buy the game. I mean, I know this goes for a lot of things. A lot of people say this for, anytime there's backlash on certain things. But, I mean, you say right in your comment that there's no change for the PC version, and the PC version that you have is fine. So it seems like you answered your own question. You didn't ask a question. If there's no benefit to upgrading, as you say, to the next version, then you just don't do that. Keep playing the one you have. It seems like a no-brainer. And this isn't even bringing into play the aspects of them, like taking it off the store and everything, because the implication in this comment is that you already own that version. So that's not even part of this conversation. You say yourself in two parts of this that there's a lack of improvement and that there's no graphical improvement. In order to justify the lack of improvement, increased price tag, see if it's worth it to upgrade due to graphical improvements, which by the way are non-existent. Seems like you have all the information you need. Just the nature of the comment too. Like, you clicked on the video already aware that, at least by your perspective, there's no improvements to this version whatsoever. So what's the point of watching the video and then expecting me to only say there's no improvement on the PC version, and then upset with me because I don't express how there's no upgrade to the PC version, and then apparently I'm like some Sega spy because I play PS5? Literally, no one is thinking of the PS3 version. Well, you've got at least one example of somebody who is. I'm right here. I still have the PS3 version right here. Anytime Sonic Generations is shown in any of my past videos, it's recorded off the PS3. Anytime you see Unleashed shown in any of my videos, PS3. Anytime you see Lost World in any of my videos, guess what? It's the Wii U. And that's one that literally no one is thinking about. No, I have the Wii U. I have this game on Wii U. Sonic Forces, anytime I talk about that game, it's going to be the Switch version. The only exception to that is, despite owning the Wii version of Sonic Colors, it just makes more sense to show Colors Ultimate when I'm just talking about the game itself and not necessarily about changes that came about in this version. If I'm just showing footage of one of the levels, I'll use Ultimate because it's widescreen and looks a little bit nicer. People might disagree with that statement. I think it looks nicer. It's kind of the idea behind a remaster, but people have a lot to say about this, which I'm not even going to go into. But yeah, as crazy as it sounds, there are people who their point of reference in older versions are the PS3. And then just to finish off with that comment, most people's incentive to get this game wasn't about graphical improvements or anything. It's about the Shadow the Hedgehog portion that's included in the game, which is actually really awesome that they did that. I'm sure most of us would still be happy buying a Generations remaster standalone, but no one's going to picture a world where a Generations remaster comes out at anything less than $40. Colors Ultimate came out $40, and you can say what you want about this remaster, but that's standard practice. That's budget pricing for like a remaster. That's why the Donkey Kong HD remaster that just came out gets a lot of criticism, because they want you to pay $60 for a game that already exists. Most anytime there's a re-release of a game, it's going to be $40. The max price for games went from $60 to $70, so the budget price may have went from $40 to $50. So you get the Generations remaster with a whole nother game, that's the Shadow portion, which is what most of us, even though we had like Generations and want to play it, a lot of us were really, that was our incentive to get the game, was the Shadow portion. Of course, now I'm going to get all these comments of people saying that they're not interested whatsoever in the Shadow part, and they only wanted the Sonic Generations portion, which is fair, but okay. And before anyone says anything about this, yes, I just called Shadow Generations a whole nother game, because if Generations can come out in 2011 with all that it is and be considered a full game, and since the Shadow part is pretty much similar in length and content to the Sonic portion, then yeah, at that point it's seen as a full game. Sonic Generations a full game, so Shadow Generations has to be seen as a full game. It's modern, everything's up to date. It may have less levels, but those levels seem a bit longer. I mean, you can finish Green Hill pretty quick, and that's not the only one either. Chemical Plant, pretty quick. Sky Sanctuary is a little bit longer, but still pretty quick. But yeah, I'd say they're about equal length, equal content. So if Sonic Generations was a full game when it released, Shadow Generations meets the criteria for a full game, but you get both of them in one package for $50 and not $70, so that's all I gotta say about that. So all this time, and I got 1 point out the way, so let's kind of speed it up and move on to another one. Alright, this one's gonna actually get into the game and not just kind of talk around the game. So the second point is the drop dash being a custom skill, which in that video I did kind of point out that for Classic Sonic, the drop dash is a pre-equipped custom skill, and for Modern Sonic, it's just part of his moveset. There's no way to turn it off. It's just Modern has it, Classic doesn't. And I point out that it's kind of weird. It's not one way or the other for both of them. Either they're both a skill set, or they're both just automatic. I did get some comments kind of explaining their perspective on it, that, well, it's because Modern Sonic should already know it because he's from the future or present, whatever, and then Classic Sonic shouldn't know the move because Mania didn't happen in his timeline yet. I think that's what they're implying, which is fair. I'm not criticizing that. I hadn't thought of that, and it's fair. The thing that gets my brain going, the questions that I ask is, does the skill shop make something non-canon? I don't have an answer for that. I mean, you do see Omuchao set up with the shop in white space, so you can assume that that's actually there and not just a non-canon addition. But is it canon that Sonic is equipping moves and unequipping them? And again, there's no solid answer to that. You also have to ask, is it canon for some moves to exist and others to not? Does his capability of performing a move tie into the story? And then you gotta look at it, well, is that just a gameplay mechanic that doesn't have to have some major story implications? Or is it part of what makes the story work? Again, I don't have a complete answer to that. But if you look at, there's some sources that indicate that the spin dash was kind of a story kind of revelation that, and like one version says that Tails did the spin dash first and Sonic replicated it, or it might be the other way around. Tails wanted to do the spin dash because he's seen Sonic spinning. Because Sonic could spin in the first game, but he couldn't spin dash. So then that would put all of the re-releases of Sonic 1 into question as far as story elements go. Should he be able to do the spin dash? And I don't see anybody really complaining that the spin dash is added into those games. At least in that example, I mean, the original game always takes precedent. Just like with Origins, Tails and Knuckles can be seen in Sonic 1, but it's understood that they're not actually there, which ties into my whole idea behind why it should be okay for Super Sonic to be there, because the original game still holds that precedent that he wasn't there. And this is just a non-canon fun addition, like Tails, Knuckles, Spin Dash. So is the Spin Dash a story-mandated move, or is it just a mechanic that you don't need to think too much about? I usually go towards the latter. I don't think it breaks the immersion or anything to understand that some things are just game-related. The game developers put certain things in certain ways because that's how a game functions. But I mean, those are reasonable explanations to why the drop dash would be a skill for classic and not for modern. That does make a separation between what was originally in the game and what that Sonic was capable of. But then it also brings other moves into question, which I'll cover next. But the double jump is featured in colors. So do we have to have a story explanation of why he can't do the double jump in Generations, and then why he can do it again in Lost World? Or is it just that's how game mechanics work sometimes? Other examples, Sonic CD had the Super Peel Out, which is also shown in Triple Trouble and Chaos. Lost World later has it, but other games, so if you put Sonic CD after Sonic 1 in the timeline, then Sonic doesn't have the spin dash, and then he has Sonic CD's goofy spin dash, and also the peel out, and then he forgets how to do the peel out come Sonic 2. But then you also have to ask, just because Sonic isn't using a move in a certain game, does that necessarily mean that he forgot it, or just chooses not to use it? But like I said, I don't think every single mechanic has to be broken down to such an extent to have it fit into the story somehow. I mean, this isn't Kingdom Hearts level stuff. This is just Sonic the Hedgehog over 30 plus years. Not everything's going to fit together. But the other thing that has me kind of question that whole idea is that, yes, it is a skill set, but it's pre-equipped. So when you start the game, before you even have access to that skill shop, Classic Sonic can already do drop dash. So yes, it's a skill set, but it's pre-equipped, which in the original game there was no pre-equipped skills. And then you dig a bit deeper and realize that those skills are only used in the levels. The levels are the only place that those skills appear in. And the levels would have to be the most canon part of the game, I mean, aside from like the cutscenes, but no one would argue that it's non-canon that Sonic is running through Chemical Plant, then Sky Sanctuary and all this. And the levels are the only places that these skills are used. You see what I'm saying? There's a bit of a disconnect, because if skills are non-canon, you can only use them in the canon levels. And then the challenges, which I'm not saying are non-canon, but they're definitely not the focus of the game, can't use the skills in. So would that make his movement in the challenges more canon than his movement in the skills? And then there's other skills like, I make a connection between Classic Sonic's homing attack in that video and connect it to that closing scene where he tries the homing attack. And, you know, like I said, it doesn't have to be some major connection for every move, but an idea I had. If classic Sonic using that move is a connection to that, and also a way to connect with Sonic 4, because originally Sonic 4 was supposed to take place after Sonic 3. Part 2 even ties into Sonic CD kind of heavily. And then there's the, I forget what it's called, it's the time stop, time slowdown move. And you get that, I think after beating the last boss, as a little bonus. And it's not hard to accept that as canon because it got the time eater and white space and all these time elements. So Sonic being able to harness that time power could just be a bonus little addition, which essentially it is. Or it can tie into the events of the game. And I don't think either way of looking at it is really wrong. But yeah, drop dash is in the game, which I like, and it's a skill set, and some people had some, you know, reasonable explanations of why it might be that way, and that's cool. But I don't really have much else to say in that matter. But I will move on to the double jump. They had no problem adding the drop dash into the game, and because of that, and because it just, you know, its usage in other games, I decided to talk about the missed opportunity to add a double jump into Sonic Generations. Because after playing Frontiers especially, or going into Shadow Generations, it definitely feels like it's a missing move. Obviously the game was made without the double jump, so no obstacle in the game is made impossible without it, but I feel like adding it in would just make it feel nicer to control without really breaking anything. I don't think a little boost in your jump is gonna like make some sections too easy or anything. Hey, maybe I could be wrong, but if you end up going down a certain path that you normally wouldn't be able to get to so easily, is it really that much of a downside? To me, I don't feel like it is. Other people might disagree. So yeah, there might be parts where doing a double jump might make the game easier, but my counter to that is if you make it a skill, which drop dash was made a skill, there's other skills in the game, equip, unequip at will. The double jump could also just be a skill set, and if you don't want it to break the challenge, just don't have it equipped. Or for people like me who think the game would flow a bit nicer with it, just have it as a skill. I'll equip it. There's a lot of skills in that game that I don't need equipped, so even if you make it like 50 skill points, that's fine. And yeah. But the funny thing about this is there's a few different comments like this that say this to like varying degrees, but there's kind of like an idea like, oh, bro can't jump. Bro don't know how to jump. Like I played this game back on PS3 and then years later came back to it, did a full playthrough on PS5, a second full play on PS5, and then also almost a full playthrough on PS3 to get all of the footage needed for this game, but yet couldn't figure out how to jump. Really? Come on now. Come on now. You think I don't know how to jump? All I'm saying is it would feel nicer to have a double jump. One thing about me, you might know, you might not know, I think the double jump is one of the most satisfying moves in pretty much any game. On my Retroidvania video, which is Curse of the Sea Rats, a game that I supported on Kickstarter, and it's a decent game, but I talk about it a few points in that game. I'm like, I hope this has a double jump. Hope this has a double jump. I would like a double jump, but maybe I'll unlock that. I love a good double jump. And I don't think I get to it in that video, but yeah, you do get to a point where you actually get a double jump, and I'm happy. I just like a double jump. Games feel nicer with a double jump. Does a game need a double jump? Not if it was designed without that being necessary, but does it feel nice to do a double jump? Yes, it does. I don't know if I really have to say much beyond that. Bro can't jump. Well, some of the other comments were like, oh, did you try holding the jump button? Yes. I appreciate the kind of tech support. Did you turn it off and turn it on again? But yes, I am aware that the longer you hold the jump button, obviously to an extent, the higher the jump will be. Because that's standard in pretty much every platformer. Not every single one, but the vast majority of them have a mechanic where if you tap a jump, you go a certain height. If you hold it, you go the whole full height. Just how jumping works in most games. Now, in Generations' case, you know, spoiler alert for the Shadow video, I do kind of touch on this a little bit, where the tap jump in Generations, Sonic Generations, is so uselessly low that there's no, like if you just do a simple tap, like not tap and hold for a second, but just tap. His jump is so small that there's literally nothing you can do with it. There's no obstacle you can clear with it. It's just funny that they would implement a jump that low when you can do a tap jump and have it go a little bit higher. So then let's break down the mechanic a little bit. If every jump in the game would require you to do a max height jump, there'd be no reason to have that variation where a tap gets you at a certain height, a hold gets you at another height. Obviously there's different levels in between, so if you hold it for, you know, let's say 5 frames, it's going to be a lower jump than if you hold it for 20 frames. Not that anybody's counting frames like that, but you know what I mean. But the minimum jump is laughably small, and the max jump I still don't feel is that high. But yeah, if every jump in the game would require you to do a max height jump, there'd be no use of the variation. So the implication of that is that there's certain points in the game where a lower jump would be preferable. Like, you know, Sonic's a very speed-heavy game, focus on your times. So if you save a few frames by doing a lower jump and still clearing an obstacle, that would be preferable to doing the highest jump and clearing that same obstacle. So then there's points where you'll want to do a lower jump. And to lead into that, there's certain aspects that would make, you know, a reasonable player think that here's a point where a full jump may not be necessary, and then you go to do it and, well, you don't clear the obstacle. So the example, I don't have the timestamp ready, but is showing Sonic kind of getting stuck up at a certain point in Sky Sanctuary, where to me, when I was playing that point in the game, it looked like appropriate amount of button hold to get over that would have been what I was putting in, and then he didn't clear it. That little bit of footage wasn't meant to try to represent that this is a platform that's not surpassable, that his max jump just can't get over this. But because of certain aspects like camera angle, maybe lighting, whatever, it can lead a reasonable player to misinterpret how much jump they need to put into any certain section. Because when I was recording that section, it was for something later on in the video, but when I got to that point, you know, I tried that jump a few times. I'm like, really? I'm not surpassing this? That's why I went and recorded it and used it for that section. But yeah, that part right there wasn't the full height jump. It just, from my perspective, felt like that jump should have been sufficient, and then he gets to the very corner of that and doesn't get over it. Obviously, holding the jump all the way will get you a higher jump. And there are points in the game where your max jump still doesn't feel good. Like, of course, it's sufficient enough to clear whatever obstacle because that is the only way to do it, doing the max jump. And then there's the other jump that's in the Perfect Chaos boss. When I was originally playing the game, that's one that the footage used wasn't then, but I thought I recorded that footage, couldn't find it, it might be somewhere on my computer. So when it came time to edit that part, I ended up recreating that scene, but that's based on an actual point where after that one save point, kind of missed the road there and tried to jump back on the road, and I'm like, oh, his jump looks like it should be able to clear that, but it can't. There is a difference between his max jump height when you're on concrete or when you're in the water. That water doesn't seem deep enough that it should have much of an effect, but also Sonic is shorter than a human would be, so maybe it does. But if you go into Chemical Plant, jump underwater, his height is at least equal with his normal jump. And it's the same for jumping out of the water, otherwise it would be hard to get out of the water and continue on with the level. His jump height coming out of the water is at least equal with his dry jump. So then that brings up the question, is the physics different for his water jump in 3D sections than it is in 2D sections? And that might sound like a silly question, but there actually is some difference between 2D sections and 3D sections physics. Apparently there's like a certain exploit or a glitch where there's like a speed cap that you can make the game ignore if you like slide into a 2D section, so you can get through the 2D section faster. But yeah, there are certain sections where the game treats modern Sonic's 2D physics different than the 3D physics. So that could very much be the case for the Perfect Chaos battle, where his 3D physics in the water give him a lower jump height, and where his 2D physics and chemical plant zone don't alter his jump height. But then you also have to ask, well, at that point, when is the player supposed to know when certain things are going to behave certain ways? Because that's not something I thought of initially. I'm just like, oh, his jump feels really low when I'm trying to jump back onto this road. And then you know from experience being in chemical plant zone that his jump isn't really affected by the water. I'm not saying it is this way, but sometimes it feels higher just because it's more of a floaty jump. It's a more floaty jump because of the buoyancy and whatnot. But yeah, like that's not a major point I had to bring up, but it's something that is a little bit funny to me. Like, no, I assure you, I know how to jump. I didn't do 3 playthroughs of this game in the past few months without figuring out that you can hold the button to go higher. All I'm saying is a double jump would feel nicer, and I stick to that, especially after moving on and doing more shadow generations. And also because they moved I mean, you can still do it on X, but because they moved the homing attack to square, that leaves that X button open, assuming you're not using legacy controls, that leaves that second X press open to be able to do a double jump. And then you can do square to do the air dash. So yeah, the way I see it, there's no downsides to adding a double jump. If the game didn't need a drop dash, at least for modern, classic Sonic, sure, why not? You put it in every other game, having it there is no issue. But yeah, I was pretty surprised when I saw that modern Sonic had the drop dash. I was expecting it from classic, but I wasn't expecting it from modern. It's not a necessary move, but it's cool that they included it. But a double jump definitely would have been a nicer addition, because yeah, Colors has the double jump, Lost World has the double jump, Frontiers has the double jump, Shadow Generations has the double jump. The only boost game that doesn't, besides Generation, the game in question, is Unleashed. So when they do an Unleashed Ultimate, hopefully a double jump is in it, just because it would feel nicer. Moving on. Alright, I think I'm going to keep this one quick because there's not a whole lot to say about it, but in that video I did bring up that it is kind of jarring that Supersonic, when you choose to turn into Supersonic, doesn't change the music. Now, I got a lot of comments, people saying, oh, I'm so happy it doesn't change the music because the music's annoying. It's so repetitive, it's annoying. And here's the thing, I don't disagree with that statement, but I also don't think that the, best case scenario to that is just not switching the music whatsoever. So yeah, that section of the video wasn't me really yo, Sega, you messed up. You should have put the music in. This game is ruined without it. I was just pointing out that, yeah, it's weird that it didn't have the supersonic music, and it's weird that it still doesn't have the supersonic music, because that's an easy thing they could have changed if they wanted to. Turns out they didn't. But yeah, the reason I think it's strange that the music doesn't change when you turn super, partially tradition. I don't want to say every other supersonic in the level changes the music, because I want to test that before saying a direct statement like that. In most instances, it does change to a super theme. But it's just, there's no power behind themes staying the same. And maybe I could have used different examples in that video, because one of them I used for Modern Sonic was Speed Highway. And that's already kind of an upbeat track, so, it doesn't sound as jarring, I guess. But maybe I'll put it here, but the Supersonic theme not changing in, let's say, Green Hill Zone definitely feels more jarring than the other examples. Because that's more of a casual song. It's upbeat in a way, but not in the same way as, Speed Highway. The BPMs aren't there, So yeah, that's Green Hill, not changing the super theme, and it definitely feels weak. And that's one thing you don't want from the super form, is to be weak. But in this game it is. Not just because of the music, but as I mentioned, the speed doesn't increase, and the duration is small too. I'll go into a little bit more of that in a second. Okay, so for the supersonic music, I got a few very similar comments relating to experiences with Sonic 2 and why the music in that game when you turn super is annoying and why that shouldn't be the case for Generations. But honestly, I don't think that's comparable, and here's why. So the format of Sonic 2 versus Generations is much different. So Sonic 2, you can get all the emeralds as early as Emerald Hill. And then when you go super, you have it for the rest of the game. It's very linear. You go level to level. And anytime you get 50 rings, at least in the original version, you're gonna go super if you do a jump. Because it didn't have the feature at that point where you press a separate button to go super. It was if you jump, you turn super. It might be a second jump. I don't remember exactly, but even if it's like you press jump after jumping, you're gonna accidentally hit it. It's going to happen. Whether it's a single jump, double jump, you're going to turn super, whether you're ready for it or not, as long as you have 50 rings. And then that replaces the music as you go along the level, and it's like that until you finish the game, because once you have super, you're not gonna just not have super. So being annoyed by it is much more understandable for Sonic 2 because of that, because you'll have it for the rest of the game, you can't turn it off, and you're gonna accidentally go super. But with Generations, the format is completely different. You can't even go super until you finish the game, besides the last boss where, that's the mainstay of that boss. Supersonic is a skill that you have to intentionally equip and then go into a level, get 50 rings, activate it, then you have the super ability. And if the music is that much of a hindrance, then easy solution is just don't go super, because your speed's not even increased anyway. For Sonic 2, it's much more understandable that you'd want to avoid the repetitive music for the rest of the game. Here, you're equipping a skill, going into a level that you already beat, because you have to beat it in order to unlock the Supersonic skill, and then you're just playing the level with a yellow Sonic, essentially, who can't take damage. It's such a niche problem because you have to do so much to have that problem. And Supersonic takes all of your skill points. It's 100 out of 100. I'm just saying it's an intentional thing to equip Supersonic, then go into a level that you already finished, to then only turn yellow, be invincible, and be annoyed by the music. But that's the one example where the music isn't a factor. But like I said, it just sounds weak. That's really my only complaint in that. I have nothing against people finding the Supersonic music annoying because, yeah, it can be pretty annoying. Sonic 2, Sonic 3 can be annoying. But this is also an example of looking at things too much as like black or white, too binary, gotta be this way or this way. Like, yeah, we get a lot of complaints about the supersonic music, so the solution is just turn off the music. Just think outside the box and you can have other solutions, I mentioned this in, I think, the Origins video. It's definitely mentioned in another video where, of course, this is less applicable for a game that's already released, because when you're doing a remaster, you put some effort into it, but you're not changing the entire game. So let's just hypothetically say that they're coming out with Sonic Mania. That game doesn't exist yet, but they're coming out with Sonic Mania. And we know that people are annoyed with the supersonic music, and we know that Bobby Bionic complained about there being no music, so we don't want to upset him either, because apparently all Sega does is tries to avoid criticism at all costs, which they do that sometimes and it backfires, and other times they don't do that. But with the way that the Sonic fanbase is set up, there's always going to be someone complaining about something. So giving a reason that something is a certain way because fans complained about it could be the case, or it could also just not be the case, because every corner you turn around, there's going to be someone else complaining about something, even if it's the color of a character's eyes or their arm color. Anyway, all I'm saying is, let's envision a world where Sonic Mania is on the horizon, and they have a little bit of a trouble with the super form, because they know that people are going to hate the music because it's repetitive, and people are going to feel it's weak without changing the music. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. My solution is, again, assuming that it's a new game and they have all of the resources to make this happen, you have a specific super theme remix for each zone. So Green Hill, yeah, you have the normal Act 1 music, you got the normal Act 2 music, but make a specific remix of Green Hill Zone for when you're super. Chemical Plant, Act 1, Act 2, has its songs. make a specific remix for when you turn super. Do that for Press Garden, do that for Studiopolis, do it for every level in the game. Make a remix for when you turn super. Then you get the best of both worlds. You get the original theme to an extent. I mean, you get the level music and you get the power of the super form. And I feel like that's a good bridge between, both complaints. Music's repetitive? Well, here's a solution. Make a song that's not repetitive. There's no rule that says your super theme has to be repetitive. It's just happened to be that way for a long time. So make a theme that's not repetitive. You miss hearing the level music? Well, make a level remix. And the Sonic series is not shy about remixes. There's plenty of remixes of different songs. A lot also are from Generations, which makes sense because it's using past elements, past battles, past levels, past characters. So you're gonna include songs that already exist but want to put your own spin on it. Yeah, Supersonic doesn't have to be on or off. But speaking of on or off, here's another crazy idea. Just make an option. In the menu, Supersonic music, toggle on, off. Sure, that then opens the door to there being an option for every little thing, and the menu might get filled up with all these different options and might overwhelm people. But also, think about the amount of time you're spending in the options menu. You're only there if you want to change something or see what's possible to change. And once you get things the way you want, you pretty much just don't go back to the option menu unless there's something that you want to change. And you can customize the game, play however you want. So yeah, just to recap, I don't blame anybody for finding the super themes annoying, because I don't disagree. They're repetitive, they're annoying, or can be annoying. I wouldn't just say they're outright annoying. But also, turning them off is very weak, which sucks because Supersonic is supposed to be the opposite of weak, and sometimes you can think outside the box and make better solutions. Now, is that more effort? Is that more money? Yeah. So maybe they're not gonna put it into Generations, but it's something to think about for the future. The next game that comes out that has a super form, take my remix idea. I think it's a good one. Anyway, so here's an interesting one. The classic Robotnik reveal. So in one of the cutscenes, in the original game, you hear Dr. Robotnik's voice, but you don't see him. And then in the new version, they actually animated him in, which in my video I said, oh, it's cool that they added him in, and it's weird that he wasn't there to begin with. And then I go on to say, I don't know why he wasn't there to begin with. And then, again, some people come with some comments that are reasonable and make sense. And those are that apparently, it's never crossed my mind, but classic Robotnik being shown in the one cutscene when it's the two of them together is supposed to be sort of a surprise, which, it makes sense. There are things that support that. Rewatching some of the scenes, I'm like, oh, that does kind of lead into that being a surprise. Starting with the first boss, you hear his voice, you see the two Sonics, but you don't see Robotnik. Then you go into the boss battle. The Death Egg robot is completely covered with the, machine head, Death Egg head with the Robotnik whiskers. So you don't see the actual Dr. Robotnik. And then you don't confront Robotnik again until he's after that battle when he's kind of eaten by Time Eater. And then you see him later for the Egg Dragoon. And I guess you're supposed to at that point be like, huh? I thought Robotnik was eaten. How's he here? Which is fair, but again, didn't cross my mind. Now I can't put myself in the mindset I had in 2011 when I first played that game, but I'm pretty sure I didn't even think about it then. It's not something that crossed my mind that, oh, this is a big reveal. Because in reality, it doesn't feel like a big reveal. There's already two Sonics. There's already two Tails. 4 Tails? I already made that joke, but still. 2 Sonics, 2 Tails. One of everybody else, which, there's no reason they couldn't have 2 Knuckles, chose not to. And then Robotnik's a very important character, so it's not too crazy to see 2 Robotniks. But like I said, I can't put myself in the mindset of 2011 me and see, was it a big reveal or did I just not even notice? And there's also other comments in that video that also say, oh, I never realized that was supposed to be a big reveal. But yeah, it makes sense. There are some indicators that would imply that that was meant to be a reveal. It just didn't feel substantial. Maybe it did for other people, but not me. But also I've had in my mind that last cutscene with them bickering. That's one of my greatest memories of Sonic Generations, so that's stuck with me for a long time. So when starting the remaster, I already knew there'd be 2 Robotniks, so that could play into it a little bit. So then that opens the door for people saying that it's wrong of them to then animate classic Robotnik into that scene, which, again, it's fair, but I kind of disagree because, like I said, that Robotnik scene with the 2 of them, that stuck with me for a long time. For other people, it's probably the same. They already know that there's 2 Robotniks, so it's no longer a big reveal, which leads me to Final Fantasy VII and Sephiroth. When that game came out, the remake, there was a lot of complaints that, Sephiroth was revealed too early. He was supposed to be like a somewhat of a surprise. He was supposed to be mysterious. You're supposed to not know about him until he's, his story is explained. But then you also have to take into account part 1 only covers throughout Midgar, so you'd only see Sephiroth at the end. So you'd play the whole game, get to him, see him, and be like, oh, who's this guy? Which in itself isn't a bad thing, but it'd feel kind of stilted because, well, everybody already knows who Sephiroth is. Maybe not somebody who's playing for the first time, but he's one of the most popular and prominent villains in video game history, so trying to keep him down low and make it a secret when the remake comes out doesn't really work. Everybody already knows him. So trying to keep him a secret in part 1 wouldn't really work. You gotta have some foreshadowing, and it shows more of Cloud's condition, where like he sees Sephiroth, but he's not really there. But yeah, the Dr. Robotnik reveal, I guess there is a reasonable explanation as to why he wasn't there initially. I think if they wanted it to be a surprise, maybe they could have gone about it different ways, other than hearing his voice but not seeing him, then still having like a spot you're supposed to look at where it's implied that he's at, but you don't actually see him. I guess I just prefer that he's there. I mentioned that you have Modern and Classic Sonic, Modern, Classic Tails. Classic Sonic is only in classic styled levels, so then you go to a boss that's from a classic game, Death Egg Robot, and it's in a classic style. So I don't think many people would have the implication that Modern Robotnik is in the classic boss battle. So from the start, you could already be like, oh, it's classic Sonic, probably fighting classic Robotnik. But yeah, classic Sonic, classic levels, classic boss, Modern Robotnik. No, classic Robotnik. Next aspect, script changes. Now, it's not surprising that there's a lot of comments saying that the script changes are unnecessary. And again, that's a fair point. At no point in my video do I say they're necessary, but you can't blame somebody for pointing out that they're unnecessary because, yeah, they are unnecessary. There's no major reasons that the script had to change. Of course, a lot of people go straight to censorship, which there is some of that. I don't think that's really deniable. They did want to change some things for one reason or another because they don't want a negative view on certain aspects of the game. So there is some censorship, which, nothing in the game originally was that crazy that they just had to change it. So again, yeah, the new script is unnecessary. But there's a lot of kind of misunderstanding, I'd call it, that the script was changed only for censorship purposes, when that's just not really true. There's a full rewrite across the board. Things are re-recorded, some things are paraphrased. Yeah, some lines have been changed to seem less harsh or whatever, but there's plenty of lines that weren't changed in that vein. The only point I'm trying to make is it's not as doom and gloom as people make it out to be. Like I said, there is some things that are, censored, but they're not pinpointed, so it seems less of an issue to me personally. Like if they only changed the line about Knuckles, apparently fat shaming Sonic, like, okay, that's a bit much. If they only changed things with Amy, or they only changed, something else, sure. But considering that there's a full rewrite and every line is re-recorded, it's, like I said, it's less pinpointed. Some things are different just because they felt like updating the script. It doesn't have to be some big, woke mentality. People love using that word. But the key to that is looking at what's bundled with it, which is Shadow Generations. Shadow Generations is a new game, brand new game, so all of the voice lines and the script were created new. They had to get their current actors to fulfill the roles of those characters. So you got Shadow, he's got a few lines in Sonic Generations, and even though they have the same voice actor, there's 13 years between the recorded lines, so it makes sense that they'd want the voices to match. If the games are together, sold together, supposed to connect to each other, you'd want the Shadow voice in Sonic Generations to match the Shadow voice in Shadow Generations. You've got Rouge the Bat, so you'd want the Sonic Generations Rouge voice to match the Shadow Generations Rouge voice.
Thanks, Big Blue. That's the first time I've ever been stolen.
Thanks, Big Blue. That's the first time I've ever been stolen.
13 years have passed since Generations to Sonic Shadow Generations. The voice isn't going to sound exactly the same. They could have gotten away with not doing re-records of the voices, but I can't really fault them for wanting to record them, to have that continuity between games, packaged together, sold together, and want to connect together. New game has to have new voices. Might as well record new voices there. So then, if they're already going to re-record lines, well, let's update the script some. Some of that might be add in some references. Some of that might be, censorship. Some of that might just be updating characterizations. But like I said, it's less of a big deal to me because it's not pinpointed changing these things strictly for censorship. They're making a full new rewrite altogether. There's many lines that are the same, there's some lines that are different, and that's why when I made the video, because I already seen a lot of people just screaming censorship and they're just ruining the game, I like to put a little bit more nuance into everything that I do. It's never really that black and white. There are some things that are needlessly censored. There are things that are just the same, but recorded differently. There are some positive changes. There are some negative changes. There's some changes that are just weird. So instead of just starting up the video and just complaining that all the new scenes are horrible and they never should have done it, like I said, I want to put a little bit more nuance into it. It's not as doom and gloom as it seems. Is it necessary? No. Is there more thought behind it than initially seems? Well, yeah, with the new game. The thing that really gets me, which I mentioned in the video, is when they reanimate, like Knuckles getting hit in the tree. They took the effort, additional effort, to change that scene, which is just weird. You didn't have to do that. But yeah, I'll reiterate this again because I know, if you dive into certain thoughts and try to explain things, people are just going to take it and run with it and act like they're trying to defend every decision. I don't think it's necessary. I don't agree with every change they made, but also I understand that there's a little bit more to it than just, we've got to change that. We've got to change that. Let's only change that, keep everything else the same. And then, as predicted, there's always going to be purists who, no matter what the new script is like, who are just like gung-ho on, no, that's horrible, they ruined it. Which, again, I understand to an extent, but also, the original Sonic Generations script is no masterpiece.
Destroy me? You and what mustache? I beat you all the time by myself, and now there's two of me.
It's fine, it does the job, but you can find forums spanning years that people, although many like Generations, there are some criticisms about it. The length of time in the game, that's a major one that I also cover in the video. The story, almost non-existent. There's some, it's enough to get you through, but yeah, not a crazy amount of story in the game. A lot of it's just kind of standing around in white space, explaining what's happening. All I'm saying is I wanted to put a little bit more nuance into the scene changes, because like I said, there's always going to be the purists that come around and be like, oh, any change made is horrible, which I disagree with. There's some changes that I quite like. There's changes that I've seen other people comment positively about. Alright, we are back. Everyone say hi to Theodore. There you go, that's my kitty. Alright, where was I? Alright, so that leads me into the next point, which is one that I find really odd, but I've seen a lot, not just in this comment section, but elsewhere too. And that's all the backlash towards Ian Flynn. Now, I'm no Ian Flynn superfan by any means. I hardly even read the comics just because the logistics of buying them all and reading through them. So my first introduction to him is pretty much with Frontiers. He's worked on Frontiers, Dream Team, I think, but I can't comment on that. Some like short animations, and then the Sonic Generations rewrite and the Shadow Generations rewrite. But like the backlash is a bit funny to me because I've only got a few points of reference. Like I said, I don't really read the comics all that much, but my understanding is people enjoyed his writing in there. Frontiers, when that game first came out, many people applauded the writing, and I was one of them. That game, in a sense, is kind of like a reboot, without actually being a reboot, taking the same name as the first game type deal. Technically, 06 was meant to be a reboot, but like Frontiers was meant to kind of steer the series in a new direction. Because after Forces, a lot of people just really lost hope. Well, a lot of them before Forces, but Forces was like the breaking point where even Sega was like, okay, we need to stop, think about our next moves, and go from there. So then with the money coming in from the movie being successful, they could put more of those resources into the game. So Frontiers was meant to kind of be a fresh start in a way, try something new, try something bold. And one of my favorite aspects of it, and I mentioned this in my review I did, was that it doesn't ignore the past games. It takes these references and uses them in a good way to kind of put all the games in the same continuity. Because after 06, Sega really battened down the hatches, boarded everything up, tried to play it super safe with a lot of things, and that's where so many changes come in from the boost era, lack of characters, lack of playable characters, different characters' characterizations being really strict, and I could go on. I mentioned some of this stuff in my What's Next video, but Frontiers was a way to, it was like a nod to say, hey, we didn't forget about these past adventures, and we're also going to go forward with a new one. There's always references to an extent. Forces has some, but they're more in the form of, hey, remember Chaos? Well, now he's here for whatever reason. Remember Classic Sonic? Well, now he's here for whatever reason. Remember Zavik? Well, now he's here. But the references in Frontiers, there's some in the main story that, reflect on the characters and what they've been through, which I think is done well. And many of them are just extra. You're exploring the island, Sonic says something like, oh, this reminds me of that. And I remember specifically on one video, not one of mine, but another video I watched about the references in Frontiers, everybody was clamoring over the Jet reference. And Jet's cool, I understand. So when that game first came out, I don't remember anybody really complaining about references. Oh no, they're references. I feel like that's something that kind of evolved since then. Unless I just didn't see it then. I'm sure you can find evidence of somebody complaining about it, but the overall majority, I don't remember people really being upset with that, and people were pretty positive about Flynn's writing in that, which you also have to take into account that game, the story isn't all in your face, something's constantly happening. There's so much downtime in Frontiers that if you were to take out all the little references, what would you put in the place? You could say you could expand more on the islands and why things are there, but you gotta remember, part of the intrigue of the story of Frontiers is you're on an unknown island, you don't know anything about even Sage to begin with, you don't know anything about the Titans, you don't know about the inhabitants, you don't know what Coco's significance is. It's meant to be a mystery that kind of unravels as the game goes on. So at the beginning, all you're going to hear Sonic say is, oh, I wonder why that's that way. Instead, you make some reference that's going to make a fan happy. You'd be like, oh, hey, I remember that. And then as the game goes on and things are revealed, they kind of already cover most of the bases on why things are the way they are. And the things that they missed, they came back with the update, Final Horizons, and a lot of the character interactions in that talk about other aspects of why things are the way they are on the islands, how things came about. So I don't think they're missing a lot of that. So again, if you were to be in charge of the script and rewrite, take out all the references, because apparently acknowledging the past is a horrible thing, and now what are you going to put in place? Just because of the way that the story's set up and like the game itself, island to island to island is, the way it's set up is there's a lot of downtime where, you could just have Sonic be silent, but that sounds very empty and boring, or you can have him comment on something that relates to something he's been through. And that's not just Sonic, that's Knuckles, that's Tails, that's Amy, that's Robotnik. When I saw the Black Arms mentioned in the diary, it was an awesome reference. Because Black Arms wasn't, basically anything Shadow the Hedgehog related wasn't brought up since that game. And like I said, the whole Boost era was pretty much like playing it way too safe with certain aspects where, a new game could come out and it's totally separate from the previous game, which something that I don't really like. I like some sort of continuation. And what Frontiers did, with all the references and whatnot, took the things from the past, acknowledges them, and makes it seem like, hey, we've been on this journey together, instead of, kind of what they tried to do after 06 and just forget that ever happened. Try to forget that Shadow the Hedgehog ever happened. Try not to reference anything then. With the exception of Generations, which that whole game is based on references. The levels are from past games. There's already references in it, like, even the PS3 version talks about genies and books. That's a reference to Sonic and the Lost Ring. Sonic Secret Rings. Sonic and the Secret Rings. And then Interstellar Amusement Park, which is Sonic Colors reference. Those were already in the game before Ian Flynn, got his hands on it. But the funny thing about the Generations rewrite is, again, that game already has references, but, unless I'm wrong and I'm overlooking it, I don't think it's filled with references at every turn. Which ones did they add? Well, they added the Time Stones one, which is one I like a lot. I've seen other people comment that they like that as well. I've seen people say that they don't like that reference, and that's because apparently Sonic doesn't use the Time Stones to travel through time, because he hits a signpost and that's what sends him to the past or the future, which mechanically, yes, that's true. You could have 0 time stones, hit a sign, go 88 miles an hour, and go back in time, or forward in time. I don't think this is ever explicitly stated, not in the manuals or anywhere else, but to me, the implication is that the time stones are responsible for all of the time travel. It's just that's in effect without Sonic actually holding on to them. Those signs that teleport him from the future to the past, those are all reliant on the energy of the time stones, making those be able to activate. That's the way I see it anyway. I'm not saying that's 100% the way that, the story's set up. Like I said, maybe this is all explained somewhere, maybe it's not. But to me, the implication has always been that the time stones, which obviously involve time, and it even says in the manuals that the time stones do affect time, as if you needed that clarification. But yeah, it's the time stones that are responsible for the time travel, even if you don't have one in hand. Even if you hit a signpost with 0 time stones, still the effect overall of the time stones being active on that planet that allow that to be possible. You take one of those past or future signs off Little Planet and put it anywhere else, it's probably not going to send you through time. That's just my guess. I haven't tried it. But I think the time stones are obviously what are making it possible to travel through time. That's what I have to say on that. And that's also another instance of just looking too deep into it. Most people heard that reference be like, oh, cool, that's a callback to Sonic CD, and called it a day after that. Others were more intent on poking holes in it, be like, actually, time stones don't send you through time. It's the signposts, which technically, at least from a mechanical, game mechanic standpoint, is true. It's another instance where you have to look at what is seen more so as a mechanic, what is seen as part of the story, how much overlap is there, and I don't have an answer for that. But with the Time Stone reference in Sonic Generations, that's another instance of time travel. Like if you, let's say 30 years ago, traveled through time, and then on a later adventure, you were sent to this white void where time kind of collapses in on itself and you see different elements of time, wouldn't your first thought be, hey, that's kind of like that other time I traveled through time? How are you going to fault him for referencing the other time you went through time? And then you could bring up Sonic 06, but that kind of erased itself, to my understanding. The events of that game ended up not happening because of time travel, and Time travel as a whole is already a headache because there's always going to be paradoxes and whatnot, but the other aspect we gotta look at is what is that reference replacing? So, in the original game, Sonic says, "How did this happen?" And now he says, "Without the time stones?" I mean, there's no weight to, "How did this happen?" It's just a question. That's why in my video I say, this replaces a boring question with a neat CD reference. Because, I mean, that's how I feel. Was the original line bad? No. It's just Sonic being curious about how it happened. But he does have some point of reference to past instances where he did do time travel. So it kind of makes more sense to acknowledge it rather than just ignore it and wonder, how did this happen? I don't see that reference being bad in any way. It's quite cool to see. Other people agree, other people don't. It's just the way it is. Other references, when Dr. Robotnik is given his whole explanation about how the events came to be, he originally said, "In my previous failure," and now he says, "After Sonic destroyed my interstellar amusement park," something like that, paraphrased. The implication was already that he was talking about the amusement park. So why not just say it? Is it really that much of a problem that he says it now? Instead of just saying, "my previous failure." Dr. Robotnik is also someone who isn't quite proud of his previous failures. Sure, he says, "Do we ever get that Sonic? Do we ever win?" It depends on what your definition of win means. I mean, get that hedgehog. Well, then no. Obviously, he doesn't like to admit that he's a failure, but he is. So him just being like, "After my previous failure," doesn't make much sense. Even though he's still kind of admitting defeat by saying Sonic destroyed his amusement park. But it's not that crazy that they would actually mention the park, especially since earlier in the game, one of the first cutscenes, Sonic mentions genies and books and interstellar amusement parks. I don't know. What other references were there? There's two I can think of that are saying South Island and then saying West Side Island. Which, in both instances, I think I mentioned that it's cool that he drops those by name, because you don't usually hear the islands themselves being talked about, unless it's Angel Island. But when do you ever hear someone say, "Oh, South Island, oh, West Side Island"? It was cool to hear that, instead of just Green Hill, Green Hill, Green Hill. Well, let's look for some synonyms, Green Hill or South Island. Even though South Island encapsulates the whole island and Green Hill is only a part of it, still, you don't just have to repeat Green Hill a bunch of times. This isn't South Island. It's fine by me. West Side Island. Now, I already did kind of criticize the chemical plant scene because it's just weird that they'd change all that, but he does say West Side Island, which, cool with me. Anybody want to tell me why that's an issue? It's just people want to complain, that's it. I can't really think of many other references that were thrown in. I can point out a part where somewhat of a reference was taken away, and that's the Tails scene with the two Tails talking to themselves, talking to each other. And instead of being like, "Oh, how does Sonic hold onto those rings?" they focus more on the events of the game itself, saying, the things go back to normal after this, and Tails like, "Oh, don't think about it too much." So that's actually a counter reference. It's taking somewhat of a reference away. It's kind of just a throwaway thought that's kind of weird to begin with, but now it's connecting to the actual story, which I think is a positive change. But yeah, the complaints on the references added in, really strange to me because unless I'm missing some, I don't think there's that many that are thrown in. They don't really feel forced or shoehorned in. And Generations itself is already one big reference to the series. That game relies on references. You can play the game without playing the past games, but it's reliant on those past games. So having references in Sonic Generations only makes sense. And apart from that, maybe Ian Flynn is just somebody people can blame for the censorship and all this other stuff. But I don't think that's his decision. Just because you're the writer doesn't mean you got full control over everything. I already mentioned that there's strict guidelines during the Boost era about how you can display certain characters, and you can find this information elsewhere. I don't have a video on it, but I've seen other people have videos on this and the way that different writers are allowed to characterize these characters. And Ian Flynn still has these guidelines he has to adhere to. He's not making all the decisions. Someone at Sega says, hey, we want to hear your thoughts on this, this, and that, but you got to make sure this is this way. You got to make sure that is that way. We're already changing this, so make sure you accommodate that change. That's all there is to it. But yeah, another example of Ian Flynn's writing, because apparently everybody is so against Ian Flynn anymore, but I don't really hear many complaints about the story in Shadow Generations. I've actually heard people say that, despite Frontiers ruining things with references, and despite Generations ruining things with references, Shadow Generations is actually pretty solid. And Shadow Generations is actually a new game that does rely on the past, but it's an opportunity to really, spread those wings and make a new story where things are actually happening in front of your eyes, kind of an in-your-face situation where things are changing, which is the opposite of Frontiers and Generations. Frontiers, you're roaming around these lifeless islands, trying to figure out why these titans are after you, who Sage is, what's up with these Coco, and what's up with these ancients. And then Generations, you're just walking around in a white void with another Sonic and another Tails. There's no story happening besides, well, keep going, Sonic, you're doing good. You mean Sonics. So, like I said, I'm no Ian Flynn super fan, but from what I've seen by him, not a problem at all. Especially when you consider Forces' writing, especially when you consider Lost World's writing, especially when you consider Colors' writing, Baldy McNosehair. Unleashed writing is fine. Generations writing is fine, but also that one didn't do anything too crazy, too interesting. But it does tone down kind of the Sonic Colors jokiness a bit, which came back in Lost World. And then Forces at least tried to take things seriously. Didn't succeed, but at least it's not Baldy McNosehair again. But yeah, I just think it's weird to really criticize him because not every decision is his. The idea of having references, to me, isn't a bad thing. And things already weren't great from Generations to Forces and everything in between. So yeah, Generations script wasn't a masterpiece to begin with. There are some things I miss about it, like Knuckles hitting the tree, because that was funny. Sonic giving Amy the hand, that was funny. But Cupcakes, I'm not mad at Cupcakes, like I said. Going back to the censorship issue, like I said, this whole script has been rewritten, so you can't really pinpoint exactly what things were censored. I've seen at least one person point out that the Robotnik scene, about him saying, oh, do I really get that crazy? Which it's possible that they changed that because they don't want to offend anybody with, the crazies going on in their head. It's possible it could be, or it could also just be another instance of the rewrite, paraphrase, write this differently, because I think it's also quite fitting what he ends up saying in the new version, which is, and they call me eccentric, which they both have some humor to them. In the first one, Dr. Robotnik is calling himself crazy, essentially by saying, oh, do I really get that crazy? The other one, he's like, oh, they call me eccentric, when he's also talking about the other Robotnik, which is him in the future. So I think it works either way. Again, I'm not looking at everything as it's doom and gloom either, where every small change has to be a big problem. Some of them are definitely weird and shouldn't have been changed, and then other ones, I really can't care less. And maybe it's just an example where the Generation script never really meant that much to me because it's already kind of bare bones, and, I like Generations, but it's also never been one of my, top favorite Sonic games, so maybe my opinion on it is just doesn't matter all that much. But if they did the same thing to another game, maybe I'd be a bit more upset about it. Who knows? So yeah, the next point I have, it's not one I wanted to talk about. It's Rouge censorship. Like, I could have brought it up in that video, but I decided it wasn't really necessary. And then fast forward to a bunch of comments to be like, oh, so we're just going to overlook the Rouge censorship? Yeah. I don't care about bat boobs. I didn't want to talk about bat boobs then, and I don't want to talk about bat boobs now. But since it's been brought up a lot, yeah, they did change Rouge's model a little bit, which obviously, yes, that's a form of censorship. The way people talk about this is like they lobbed off her entire front end and she's a completely different appearance-wise. It's not really the case. Like, they did adjust it, which is already more than they had to do because they didn't have to touch it to begin with. But yeah, a lot of the backlash is acting like they just completely removed everything, which isn't the case. It's a pretty slight change. Like I said, still not necessary, still kind of weird that they would do it. But it's, you know, she still has the stuff that she has. They didn't completely change her model. When it comes to censorship of this type, there's, of course, different perspectives you can look at it with. It's really not for me to say which one is which, because unfortunately, since Rouge the Bat isn't real, we can't ask how she feels about this. So we could go back and forth about certain things, but it's pointless. I mean, it's a cartoon bat. I don't really want to go do a deep dive into this. The only thing I will really say about it is, just like with the script changes, there's a little bit more to it than just, oh, we need to change that. If they came out with a completely brand new game that wasn't tied to Sonic Generations, and Rouge had the model that she does in the final version, I don't think anybody would bat an eye. I don't think anybody would complain. But it's because you have that point of reference where you can look at, you know, this is what it did look like, and this is what it looks like now. You can do an A-B comparison on what the change is compared to what it was. So I don't think it's really the new model itself that people are really that upset with. It's that they decided to go in and make that change, which, again, understandable to an extent. But yeah, if they decided, you know, somebody made the decision like, hey, this new model of Rouge has to have some adjustments. And the art team says, okay, we'll make those adjustments. So for the new scenes within Shadow Generations that are brand new, it's not really out of place that there'd be a new model for new scenes. I can't go into depth and talk about, well, does Shadow have a new model or is it carried over from Generations? Because I don't know. Somebody would probably answer that question for me. Does Sonic use the same model as Generations? I don't know, actually. But if they, you know, if we already understand that, yeah, they made at least an adjusted model for Shadow Generations, basically they just drag and drop, replace the model in Sonic Generations, and now you have the updated model. Is it still a form of censorship? Yeah, but there's a little bit more to it than, well, we made the change over here, so just carry that change over to the other game. At least that's just how I look at it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much more to say in that regard. Because they also changed Classic Sonic's model, which I do talk about in that video, because that's a little bit more interesting to me, that his spikes are different, rather than Bat Boob's different. But yeah, they changed his spikes a little bit, and obviously that's not a form of censorship, but they updated the model, and at every point in the game where that model is shown, not in every cutscene, but the statue of Classic Sonic, if you go into the statue room, the statue does have the new model with the new spikes, so it's across most of the game, besides already done cutscenes. But yeah, Classic Sonic's model is different, no big deal. Rouge's model is different. To some it's a big deal, which obviously the reason behind it is sort of the fuel to that, whereas the reason behind Classic Sonic's model being different is in a totally different vein. I don't even know if there's a specific reason for that. But yeah, I mean, that's the way it is. I'm not saying one version is better than the other. It's just I didn't find it very necessary to talk about to begin with. But of course, that's what's on the mind of a lot of fans. And well, here we go. You got me to talk about bat boobs. But yeah, all around, didn't find it necessary. Didn't find it necessary to talk about. Didn't find it necessary that they made the change to begin with. And it also doesn't really seem that necessary to complain about it. Of course, someone could bring up, oh, it's a slippery slope. What else are they going to change? I don't know. Guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there, because they're not going to just not make the changes, probably. Unless, hey, maybe complaining about Rouge would encourage them to not make slight changes in the future, which who can say? But yeah, that's Rouge censorship. Let's go on to point 9. Oh yeah, Amy characterization. It's always funny to me when I see like giant rifts forming in the fan base. You can have different people, different groups of people, very passionately defending or complaining about certain aspects that are like complete opposites of one another. So for the Amy characterization, there's been complaints for a long time that, you know, they kind of did Amy dirty with a lot of her characterizations, being obsessed with Sonic. Well, that's basically it. Being obsessed with Sonic. And I don't think it's a great characterization, but it also doesn't ruin my experience. There's some scenes where, okay, yeah, Amy's chasing Sonic, he runs away. A little bit funny, kind of overdone. And that's really my only complaint about that whole characterization, is it's kind of overdone. But yeah, there's some fans that, hate that version of Amy and are so happy that Frontiers and, to an extent, Generations re-release changes that aspect. And then there's a whole nother group of fans, which, very interesting to see, are vehemently, did I say that right? Complaining that they're taking away that characterization. And it could be for one reason or another. Overall, I think this is yet another example of certain Sonic fans seeing things that aren't actually there. And what I mean is they'll talk about a big character arc that comes from Amy overcoming this obsession she has with Sonic, and by changing that in past games, that's destroying this big arc that she has as a character, which is creative thinking. I think it's flawed because these characterizations are on a case-by-case basis. Sonic Adventure had a pretty good characterization of Amy. She mostly stood on her own. She went on her own adventure. She did the whole thing with E102, Birdie, and all that. And she had her own sort of story. She crossed paths with Sonic, but she didn't rely on Sonic. She didn't obsess over Sonic. And then you have like Heroes, where she's obsessed with him. You have Sonic Freeriders, where she's obsessed with him. And then Frontiers, she's not. The original Generations, there's some references to her being obsessed with him. It's not, she doesn't have a lot of screen time, so it's not all that prominent, but it's there, and they kind of changed that a bit in the new release, like I said, with the cupcakes. But yeah, I don't think you can really apply this huge, character arc, because I saw a comment say that Forces was the turning point where she lost Sonic and now she has to stand on her own. But that's also ignoring how she stood on her own in Adventure. She had her part to play in Adventure 2. Heroes, you have that ending scene where she's chasing after Sonic, and there's some cutscenes where she's obsessing over Sonic. But also she is the leader of her team in that, so she also has some individuality too. So it's just kind of case-by-case basis of how much or how little of this aspect of Amy is being portrayed. Do I like the obsession angle? No. Do I hate it? No. Do I think it's better that she kind of sheds that? Yeah. Do I think they should have changed past scenes that already exist to try to fit with the modern view of her? No, they didn't have to change that. But I also don't see it as a grand character arc either. But I guess just the last Amy thing I have to say is, like I said, there's kind of a rift in what characterizations both sides of the fan base like. But one thing that I've seen a few times is the argument that by taking away this, Sonic obsession, you're left with an empty character, which, by your own admission, you're saying that she already didn't have much characterization to begin with if her only attribute is she's obsessed with Sonic. Because if you take that away and she's left empty, well then there's no other defining aspects of her character. Now, do I think that's the case? No. There's many cool aspects about Amy, even some that they really try to push, like the tarot cards, or anytime she's present, just, hey, give her a hammer, which was replaced by tarot cards in a lot of instances in Frontiers. But yeah, they didn't have to change Amy, but the two sides of the Amy fan base will never see eye to eye, most likely. Because, even with, the shipping aspect, because apparently every fictional character needs a relationship, the Son-Amy thing is something that a lot of fans really love, and then it's something that a lot of fans really hate. So if Amy's no longer obsessed with Sonic and has no attraction to him whatsoever, well, then that ruins their Son-Amy ship. Which, from my perspective, whatever. Other people see things certain different ways. It is how it is. I don't have much more to add to Amy besides, I think she's fine in Frontiers, and you don't really get to see her much else. She was in Origins, but you don't really get to see her in action. You see the action because she's going through the levels, but you know what I mean. There's not dialogue. Dream Team, does she have dialogue? I don't know, because I haven't played it. And yeah, that's really all there is to it. This point is more something I just found interesting, how different sets of fans will have vastly different views about one topic, and that's just part of the fan base. Okay, getting towards the end, we're kind of off the actual subject matter of Generations now, and now I'm just going into different points on that video. So apparently, When I made that video, I committed one of the most atrocious sins in history, and I said the word conversate instead of converse. That really seems to rub certain people the wrong way, which is fair. There's words that I don't like, or different word-related things, spelling mistakes and all that I don't like, but I don't know. It's a Sonic video. But I've seen a few different comments. Initially, I just ignored it because it doesn't really matter that much. But I'm also thinking about the future, which when you put out a video, you're gonna continuously, as long as people are watching it, continuously get comments. Doesn't matter if it's been addressed, talked about, you know, they're not reading comments, they're probably not watching a whole separate video, subscribe it. So it's not like this is gonna turn people off from leaving that comment. I mean, I still get comments on that oddities video, sign oddities, about, you know, using the word peace sign, the phrase peace sign or whatever. It's like, don't worry. I saw the same Did You Know Gaming video where the dude says, yeah, it's not a peace sign, it's a V for victory sign. It's just, I didn't make it my life goal to forward that message and let everybody know how wrong they are for saying peace sign and not victory sign, or V for victory, V sign, whatever. And not to go on a huge tangent about that, but at least where I live, nobody says V for victory. Nobody recognizes it as V for victory. It's just, if someone does this, they're like, oh, it's peace sign. It's a really big nitpick to, like, oh no, that's not a peace sign, that's V for victory. When the whole, you know, the context of that sentence anyway was just bringing attention to his hand, to the pose he's making. Not the regional expectations of the people that wrote the game and, you know, their view on that sign. Sure, he finishes the level, victory, cool. But apparently it's man's biggest sin to call this a peace sign. Because in Japan, they don't call it a peace sign. Okay, cool. It's like, have you ever heard somebody say a word that's origin is from another language, but they really try hard to pronounce it the way they think that that language pronounces it, when you could just say the word in question, like karate. I mean, that's more of a reference to SpongeBob, but like in Japan, they don't say karate, at least to my understanding. So unless you're doing a SpongeBob reference, if you say karate, I mean, you're just a tryhard. If I talk about, oh, that's a V for victory, like, no, because that's not natural. So going into some of that, it's not uncommon for me, and just in my everyday life, to hear people say conversate. That doesn't mean I'm not aware that there's a word converse, but conversate is a word I hear being used, and just the whole nature of language is you say the words that you hear. I mean, I'd argue that just saying the words that feel natural to you is a sign of successful language use, because the only purpose of language is to communicate. And if you're communicating in a way that feels effortless to you, that the listener knows what you're saying, then sounds successful to me. We don't have to be here thumping dictionaries and being like a really strict English teacher, like everything has to be to the T, by the book. That's just not how language works in actuality. If you're writing an essay or a large email to your boss, sure, put it together in the most correct way possible, but it's a Sonic video, like, come on. But as always, let's dig into it a little bit deeper. So like I said, it's not uncommon for me to hear people say conversate. And that could just be a regional thing, because different groups of people, depending on many different factors of what makes those groups up, could say words differently, and conversate is just one of the words that I don't bat an eye when I hear it. Didn't bat an eye when I wrote it in the script, didn't bat an eye when I recorded it voiceover, didn't seem like a big deal to me. So then you're like, okay, conversate is wrong. Well, why is it wrong? We can look at other words, like commentate. That's an actual word. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. So what do commentators do? They commentate. You could argue that they comment, but commenting and commentating are a little bit different. Sure, if you use them interchangeably, people are still going to know what you're saying, but they're used to at least slightly different degrees. And that's a word that ends in tate. Conversate. Commentate. The word commentate could even be a big reason why the word conversate became more prevalent because it sounds like an already existing word. And the thing that makes words is just people using them. So if you say something wrong for long enough and a lot of people do it and it just becomes understood and accepted, well, that's what makes that suddenly a word. So there's like a very thin line between a real word, a informal word, and a slang word. If you're using it to communicate and the other person knows what you're saying, well, it's word. Obviously, if I say boogably black, that means nothing because I just made it up. So if I say that to someone, they're gonna look at me like I'm crazy because they don't know what I'm talking about. But if enough people said that, word and attach some meaning to it, well, suddenly that's a word. Even though it sounds goofy, that's the way words work. Look back 100 years, they're not gonna recognize everything we use as words today. 100 years from now, there's going to be things that they say that we will have no idea. I mean, we won't be around for that, but you know what I mean. And then there's other words in the English language that end in tate, so I don't think that's the issue to begin with. Celebrate. Sonic and his friends got together to celebrate his birthday. Well, that's not wrong. It's a verb, so if you talk to one another, you conversate. I know people hate it, that's fine. There's words that I hate. Methinks is one of them. You might think that people just use that in like a cheeky situation. To me, it just sounds like, I don't know, that Gollum from Lord of the Rings saying it, or Lionel Snarf saying it. Methinks you're wrong. But like, I've seen people online who, by everything else in their, comments, lead me to believe they were being serious, unironically used the word methinks, and that's just how it is. I cringe when I see that word. I don't even like the word cringe, but I used it. But I saved this kicker towards the end because even if a word isn't in the dictionary, if enough people use that word and understand its meaning and you're communicating effectively, well then that, becomes a word. Dictionaries only define what's already being used. Not like a dictatorship that says, hey, you have to use these words this way. No. Usage of the word precedes the dictionary definition. People that write a dictionary, they look at how words are being used and update accordingly. They're not creating words that people then go and use. They're seeing people using words and then they add them. So sure, the history of Conversate is that it's a back formation of conversation. It's incorrectly saying converse, but it's still a word nonetheless because it's used as a word. But the kicker is, it is in dictionaries. You can even trace it back to apparently the 1700s, and it's a word that's been used. I'm not making the rules. People have said that word long before I existed. It's a word. And then the last point is, converse is a word, and then there's conversate, but also the usage of both of them is a little bit different. Sure, converse is more formal, conversate is more informal, but also I like conversate because it has more emphasis. We conversate on this matter, or just we converse. It's just the way I see it. I mean, I didn't think I'd need to talk about the usage of language in a Sonic video, but a lot of people have brought up, I said conversate, and it's not a word. But yeah, I said the word conversate. Apparently that's a big sin, but you know what? I'm gonna continue using words that feel right to me. Anyway, let's finish this conversation. And that's one point that isn't really about generations, and it's towards the end of the video, but there's a lot of pushback on just like kind of a throwaway point I made. There's like, they did Sonic Generations. Next, I would like to see them do Sonic Unleashed. And when they do Sonic Unleashed, it'd be nice if they updated the combat with the Frontiers team that did Sonic Frontiers' combat. Apparently, that's the wrong thing to say. It's been my understanding since Frontiers came out that people liked Frontiers' combat. Again, that doesn't mean that it's flawless, that it's perfect, the prime example of how any game should be played, but I've heard many good things about it, even with the DLCs adding in like a battle mode where you fight different enemies. And in my review for the DLC, I do bring up that putting it in that context shows a lot of the flaws. So I'm not here trying to say that the Frontiers battle system is perfect, but a lot of people were pretty happy with how the battle system was, at least from my perspective. I didn't see a lot of people complaining about it. Also, sure, Frontiers might have had some rough edges, but for the most part, it was received well by a lot of people, especially a step up from Forces. Of course, you got the guy that's going to say, well, anything's good compared to Forces. Sure, but that's missing the point. They're taking a step in the right direction and should be congratulated for that, because we don't want Sonic Forces Part 2. But there's always, like, since Frontiers, was pretty well received by a lot of people. Again, not saying it's a flawless, perfect 10 out of 10 game, but for the most part, people enjoyed it and looked at it as a step in the right direction. The people who didn't like it have to be a little bit more vocal, and really, every opportunity they get, ooh, that's bad, ooh, that's bad. Forces sucks, story sucks, characterization sucks, battle sucks. There's a comment that was like naming why Sonic Frontiers' battle system sucks, but then the things they were mentioning were things that could easily be adjusted, taken out, or don't even reflect on the battle system to begin with. Like, sure, it's really annoying when you're running around the island and you're then suddenly locked into a battle. But that's not the battle system that's at fault. That's just the decision they made to focus you in on that battle. When I talk about the battle system, I'm talking about the way he moves, the type of moves he does, which, again, not flawless. Some of the more showy, flashy, animated moves, yeah, they get pretty repetitive and it's annoying. And I think they added a way to turn those off, at least to an extent. But yeah, in my opinion, Frontiers' combat system felt nice to perform. It's not flawless, not perfect, but there's been endless, and I mean endless, complaints for a long time, specifically about the Werehog battles in Unleashed. And sure, there's going to be the people that come out and say, oh, those people just don't know how to play. Could be the case. All I'm saying is those are complaints about the battle system that have been prevalent for a long time. Not saying they're my views. I can play Unleashed just fine, play through the Werehog levels, it's okay. But also, I don't see a situation where Sega re-releases Unleashed and just completely leaves the battle system alone when there's been more than a decade of complaints about that battle system. And then even the point of, like, yeah, I brought up Frontiers just because I'm like, okay, I like Frontiers' battle system. I think it works fine. That doesn't mean that they're just gonna copy, paste, because literally nothing works like that. You can't just copy the battle system from Frontiers and drag it, drop it into the Werehog, because the Werehog is not modern Sonic on the Starfall Islands. It's a different scenario. All I was suggesting is that since I think that the battle system in Frontiers is fine, you just have that team tweak the battle system in Unleashed with the Werehog. Obviously, it's not going to be copy-paste, because that doesn't work. No, Frontiers battle sucks. Don't ruin Unleashed. Yeah, don't ruin the game that people have complained about endlessly for. Or we could start thinking below the surface level and realize that, well, there could be a happy medium between what's already present in Unleashed and what could be taken and adjusted, even if we take Frontiers out of the equation. Like, alright, even if we take Frontiers out of the equation, there could still be a happy medium where we take what's already in the game, adjust it slightly, and make it better for everybody. But nah, having any adjustment to Unleashed is just going to be a total failure. It's going to ruin the game. Which, yeah, there's that potential. Anytime you change anything, there's the potential for it to get worse. Or maybe they could be careful with their decisions and make it actually better. Is that too much of a stretch? Again, like I said, I thought people liked Frontiers' battle system. And hey, maybe people do, it's just the more vocal people didn't. But yeah, that was just a throwaway statement at the end of the video to be like, hey, if they do Unleashed, maybe they'll adjust the battle system because everybody already complains about it. And when they do release Unleashed Ultimate, or whatever they call it, and the battle system is adjusted, just come back to this video. I told you so. And if that doesn't happen, well, I'll just cut this part out. I'm kidding. I'll leave it in, but, I've had some predictions in the past that turned out to be true. And that's really impressive if you just ignore all the other speculations that didn't come true. But no, I mean, it's not even Generations, which is the topic of this video, so no point in spending more time on it. But yeah, If they re-release Generations and the battle system's the same, I'm not going to complain. I'm just saying a lot of people do complain, so maybe that's something that's going to happen. And hopefully they don't absolutely ruin the part of the game that people already hate. You know, I don't hate it. You might not hate it, but let's just look at the vast majority of what people are talking about. Yeah, I think that's all of the points I wanted to cover. I feel like this video might have just kind of... If anybody's still watching, tell me if it derailed or not. My exhaustion went up considerably as the video went on, and my mouth is dry and I can't revitalize my thirst. It is thirst. I don't know what I'm saying. But yeah, that's the end of the video. If you made it this far, then I guess I don't have much to worry about because, well, you watched this far, so what else are we gonna say? Most people probably clicked away early on, and I don't blame you. But I just figured it'd be fun to put this video together. Like I said, a lot of these points were much more prevalent when the video first came out, and there's a lot of views, a lot of comments going around, so I kept a note of a lot of those points, and I almost didn't do this video, but why not? I'll put it out. Worst thing that can happen is if people don't like it, I can delist it, pretend it never happened. If people do like it, well then it's a win. If it gets no views, it's kind of a null point. No one watched it anyway. If it gets a lot of views, well maybe I'll have to do another video with some explaining to do because I didn't explain some of these points fully. We'll just see how that goes. Yeah, my kitty cat right here is hungry. He's gonna need his cat food. And I'm exhausted. I don't have much else to talk about. I'm sure I could dig some more holes and talk more about Generations, but I'm ready to move on to Shadow, which I already did move on to Shadow. That video will come in the future. So you'll see it once it's here. I don't know if I had enough Generations footage to even cover this whole video. So if I did, good. If I didn't, I don't know. We'll see what else I put in its place. But yeah, more Sonic videos coming on the way. If I didn't do a good job explaining anything here, just drop a comment. I'll try to dig myself out of that hole. And if I succeed, that's good. If I don't succeed, then I think the world will keep turning. Yeah, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. If you haven't watched the Origins kind of explanation video, watch that one. Because I think that one is actually quite good. I don't know how the quality of this one's going to be. I have rewatched that Origins video and I was actually kind of happy with the result, which that's a big thing for me because it's easy to think somebody is just like so full of themselves that everything they do they love, but that's never been the case for me. It's taken a long time to like create something, put it out there, and then watch it at a later time and be like, hey, you know what? I did a good job. So I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I'll pat Theo on the back. And that Origins video, I already watched it a few months back, and there are a few points in that made me like audibly laugh because I forgot that I made certain points or references, and it was just funny to me. And I don't, don't get the wrong idea. I'm not rewatching my videos every day, just basking in the glory of my own work, but sometimes I do, and I'm happy with a lot of the output, which is good. I think I've made progress. Maybe I'll rewatch that Kingdom Hearts video one day. I don't think I ever have rewatched it. At least not the second one, the follow-up to it. Just kind of like behind the scenes, consuming on my life video. I haven't rewatched that. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let's get this cat fed. Unless Theo just wants to look into the camera. This would make a bit better video, wouldn't it? Just looking at Theo all day. Alright, I don't have an outro for you. Just hopefully I didn't talk in circles too much. Thanks for watching.